This episode of Going in Raw is sponsored by Aura Frames. From big events to life's everyday moments, Aura Frames makes it easy to upload unlimited photos directly from your phone, so your favorite memories are always within view.
Named the #1 digital photo frame by Wirecutter, Aura Frames can be preloaded and personalized to make a truly unforgettable gift this holiday season.
So save on the perfect gift by visiting auraframes.com to get $35 off Aura's best-selling Carver matte frames by using promo code RAW at checkout. That's AURA frames.com, promo code RAW. This deal is exclusive to listeners, so get yours now in time for the holidays. Terms and conditions apply. Hey, Friendo, Steve here.
And Larson.
Welcome back to Going in Raw, the only pro wrestling podcast you need to be listening to. On today's episode, it's a count out, which means we're going to go back in time. And given the heartbreaking moment that we experienced the last Raw on Monday, is that heartburn or is that heartbreaking right there?
Maybe a little both.
A little bit of A and a little bit of B, huh? When you get to a
it's
certain
coffee
age.
before we started here, so.
Yeah, you never know. Of course, the New Day kicking Big E to the curb, saying, we don't need you, ganging up on him to find a newfound solidarity amongst Kofi and Xavier Woods. We thought we'd go back and look at other heartbreaking moments, and what do you know? We found 10 of them here for count-out.
Yeah, there's a lot of them.
Yeah,
now,
man.
To preface, these are individual moments
Yeah.
that were scripted to be part of the show.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So we're not talking about any sort of accidents, injuries, so on and so forth.
Yeah.
Didn't include memorial shows because basically that's like every segment is a heartbreaking segment, and memorial shows, they're emotional.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So we just found moments
Yeah.
from wrestling history, and hey, let's talk about 10 of them.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. And then, of course, a good way to put it, rather. And then yesterday, on Thursday's show, right when we were concluding, I neglected to notice that there was a super chat there from Kamari Bess, who said, do you think WWE will do Io versus Rhea at WrestleMania?
Not next year. No, if it's going to be Rhea versus Liv, that's the story they're building up to. I
think that's going to be the WrestleMania thing. I mean, it's always possible that they could pivot, but I think right now, they invested a lot of time into Liv Morgan, and I think that's the kind of thing that you want that they want to see pay off at WrestleMania. But man, one day I want to see Io. I want to see Io Sky main event of Night 2 WrestleMania.
That'd be fantastic
because she's terrific. Anyways, let's go ahead and dive into these here. Heartbreaking moments. If Io doesn't main event of WrestleMania, it'll be a heartbreaking moment, but we'll go ahead and do these ones instead. Number 10. Daniel Bryan's WWE retirement. This was Raw from February 6th, 2016. Wow.
It's hard to believe it's been almost 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Almost 10 years since he had to retire. And I believe so we're going to talk about a conversation he had with Vince here in a second. I believe that conversation, at least the telephone, whether it was all telephone or there's some in-person aspect, we got to see on Total Bellas.
Yeah.
That moment was heartbreaking, where he was told, or not, what Vince told him here, we ain't going to clear you, therefore you're retiring in Seattle.
Isn't it wild? Like, I think the first time I recognized that retirements in WWE were basically just like Vince-driven story things. Like, honestly, like real retirements, like when, for example, when Ric Flair retired in WWE, he didn't want to do that. And we know that because last year he had another match.
Yeah.
And that was like Vince calling him up and being like, hey, we're going to retire you. And Ric Flair's like, what? I got a lot of wrestling left in me. Like, I know I'm old, but no, pal, we're going to do it at WrestleMania.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that for that entry.
Oh, snap. Okay, I'll shut up then. But yeah, again, this was Vince McMahon basically saying, hey, we're not going to clear you, so we want you to retire. Like, the prospect of Bryan ever being cleared, given that he's a relatively young man here, was so foreign to Vince that he was just like, I want a ratings pop. So we're going to retire you. And I guess someday, if you ever do come back, you'll just come back and that'll happen.
Yeah.
And it did. But he goes into a little bit more depth when it comes to the actual conversation with Vince during an episode of The Sessions with Renee Paquette. He said this: "It was weird because Vince McMahon called me on Saturday. I gave the speech on Monday, and he called me on Saturday and said, 'We're not going to clear you. I'd like you to announce your retirement on Monday.' He says, people at that point, it's getting so close to WrestleMania, people are wanting me to come back. What better place to do it than Seattle? You know, that sort of thing. I'm like, I got to think about it. I talked to Bree and said, they're not going to let me wrestle. I might as well do it in front of my friends and family in the building where my dad last saw me wrestle, which is very emotional for me. It was a very hard day."
So did you rewatch his speech?
No, I've seen it a couple times over the years. And it is quite heartbreaking. And so, yeah, you know, it's just a big bummer.
It is a massive bummer. So he did an interview, Bryan Danielson, with WDEL.com in 2021. I guess provided a little additional context in terms of why W wanted him to retire.
It's because he was a liar.
He said Cody taught him how to lie. Anyways, he said this: "I legitimately thought I was healthy and still think that I'm healthy. One of the reasons I was forced to retire was not because of the concussions, because I lied about that. You have to understand, from WWE's point of view, I'd been wrestling for them for 6 years, but then all of a sudden they opened this Pandora's box about lying about his medical history, and now we can't trust him. A lot of that was building the trust back, but they were also legitimately looking after my health. I was going to see doctor after doctor and doing everything I could to improve brain function to show above and beyond that my brain was healthy. It's also my love of wrestling. It felt like I wasn't ready to be done yet. I still needed to come back."
So his retirement was due to concussion stuff.
Yeah.
Right. And yeah, I mean, that's, you know, I think the reports were in the subsequent 3 years he was like doing hyperbaric chamber stuff and, you know, really going all out. And I remember, so wait, it was 3 years. So it would have been 2019 when did he come back?
2018.
2018, because we weren't at the office yet, were we?
No.
I thought we were here in my office.
Yeah.
When
It was March 20th, 2018 when we were doing the stream.
Oh, so it was just over 2 years. Okay. For some reason I had
a little bit over 2 years. We were doing the stream and people in chat were like, Daniel Bryan is coming back. Daniel Bryan's coming back. It took us like 15 minutes to notice. People were screaming at us that Daniel Bryan was cleared and was coming back.
So we were right on the verge of going to the office then. That must have been when we were waiting for internet to be at the office. Because remember, there was that period of time, because at WrestleMania we did at the office, but the internet was so bad because we were like borrowing it from a neighbor. Yeah, that was dumb. So yeah, that was really, because he was like, obviously, as you guys know, the most loved guy in the WWE during that period of time, you know. So yeah, good stuff. Let's move on to number 9. Darby Allin loses the TNT title to Miro. This is my well-known, everybody, I've talked about this endlessly. My favorite moment in AEW history, Larson, was Darby Allin losing that TNT title to Miro. And it was, you know, he was with Sting at the time, and he was basically working himself to death, defending that title every single week, just killing himself. And then he comes up against this monster, Miro, who had no problem whatsoever against Darby Allin. Darby basically, you know, had the guy breaking a sweat, beating him. And there was that moment when he looks at Sting and Sting looks back at him and he has that look on his face. And it's a perfectly communicated nonverbal moment where he's just like, you know, sometimes it just goes this way, kid. And then Darby goes and he gives him everything he has and it's nothing. And Miro laughs him off and he puts him in the game over and that's it.
Yep.
Beautiful. It was just a really, really awesome moment, and I wish that AEW would endeavor to do more of that kind of stuff. But he talked about a little bit on the Wrestling Perspective podcast, and he said this: I was hyped to go out when I did because I was having those string of main events, and we were drawing good numbers when I was main eventing. I didn't want to overstay my welcome. Like, what the fuck? When's this guy going to lose? I didn't want to be that guy. I don't have no ego when it comes to this. I was like, dude, I'm ready to roll out when I'm on top with it. So it was good. I really liked it. It was a perfect storyline moment and a perfect way for him to lose the title to the perfect opponent at the time, Larson.
Yeah. These next two entries, this one and the following one, are AEW moments, and I think it's when they were probably at their peak in terms of telling stories in the ring during the course of matches. I'm not just talking about working limbs. Major character beats that were communicated during matches, and I've always kind of felt that's when AEW was at its best, and it's something they've kind of gotten away from. During this creative downturn they've had over, depending on when you think it starts, the last 2 years. But yeah, this moment was like perfectly executed. Darby and Sting share that look. Darby says something. I can't make out what it says. It's a couple words.
Yeah, I don't think it's you can't really tell. Like it's
There's a fist bump. There's a mutual understanding that this is probably it, but I'm gonna go down swinging.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And Darby hits a series of moves, hits a code red, a couple stunners, not enough to keep Miro down. As you said, Miro locks on, the game over, match over. Darby passes out.
Yeah. It's a really great moment, and it's like, yeah, it's one of those where you can. I've watched it a bunch of times, and every time I watch it, I'm like, God damn, that's just a really good performance moment, you know?
Yeah. And Miro played his part perfectly too.
Oh, yeah.
Laughing the whole way. Oh, it was so good.
Yeah. No, it was fantastic. Let's move on now to number 8. Kenny Omega and Hangman Adam Page lose the tag titles. This is at All Out 2020. Boy, this is the other, my other favorite AEW moment was the entirety of Hangman Adam Page and Kenny Omega's story leading to, eventually Hangman beating him.
Yeah. So this whole match is, the setup for this is great because you got Hangman, after getting manipulated by FTR, who are their opponents in this match, over the previous weeks, driving a wedge further between him and the rest of the Elite. Hangman's going like almost overboard in terms of doing everything he can do to win this match. Almost, if maybe not more, for Kenny, more so than himself.
Yeah.
Because Kenny, at this point, is the last person that he could probably call a friend in this world that he's in right now. And, the weeks leading up to this, they had that tournament or the gauntlet match where he cost the Young Bucks their match. And this whole stretch, he always has a drink in his hand. He's got like dark rings under his eyes, like he hasn't been sleeping.
Yeah.
And the moment here that's perhaps the most heartbreaking. The setup for it is perfect, as I mentioned, because he's going overboard, and Kenny's like, he and Kenny are working well. They high five, which isn't a huge thing you wouldn't think, but it's something they didn't do in the past. Is when they finally lose.
It's like the double high five.
Yeah.
And Kenny takes a beat to do it, but he does it, and
and so there's a spot where Kenny's getting his leg work throughout. There's a spot where they're going for their finish. Cash, I believe, evades it. Kenny looks to hit him with a V trigger. Cash gets out of the way. Hangman eats it. FTR takes care of Kenny. They hit Page with the double team pile driver. Page kicks out the first time. Doesn't kick out the second time. And so FTR leaves a couple cold beers by Page. Kenny chases him off with like a tray table. And then you had this moment where he's holding that tray table and looks like he's going to hit Hangman with it. But Hangman gets to his feet. And it's just, he stumbles towards Kenny. He's looking for just some sort of emotional support from Kenny, because he feels like he let Kenny down. He let himself down. And Kenny lets him fall and leaves.
Oh, it's heartbreaking. It really is.
It's just devastating to see Hangman just emotionally just at a complete loss there.
Yeah.
And it's just the whole story they told with Hangman's journey from the beginning of AEW to finally winning the title is the best story they've told. And I won't say it was told perfectly, because it wasn't, but gosh darn it, if it's not one of the best stories about humans, human characters, relatable human beings told in the world of pro wrestling, I don't know what is.
No, I agree 1,000%. I think if there's one thing that AEW can really hang its hat on, it is the Hangman Adam Page story. And I think that goes up till today. He still is one of the most compelling guys in pro wrestling. And even if the company around him writ large isn't really connecting creatively, he is.
Yeah.
And dude, honestly, Kenny's been gone for how long now?
A while.
Has it been over a year?
It might be pushing a year, yeah.
I'm trying to line up, because given that Hangman's stock seems to be kind of back up in the main event level, the return of Kenny Omega, which is coming pretty soon. I think he's booked for the Wrestle Dynasty, isn't he?
He is, yeah. Yeah, he's taking on Gabriel Kidd.
That's right, yeah. But his return, you gotta wonder. Number one, because it's gonna be a big deal. You gotta figure Kenny's gonna at least interact with main event stuff. It'd be weird if he didn't.
Yeah.
And a Kenny Hangman reunion and what that would look like now could be incredibly interesting ground to cover.
Definitely. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Anyways, before we continue on, man, we've been talking about our new sponsor all week, Larson. So let's go ahead and remind the people.
Let's do it. Let's take a quick break here and get a word from our sponsor, Aura Frames. You know, Steve,
Yes.
so often I take pictures on my phone. You know, whether I take pictures of huge events or just kind of everyday moments, all those pictures just seem to get stuck on the camera roll on this phone of mine. And then when I want to share those photos with, say, my family, I got to spend a bunch of time searching through those photos, scrolling through them all, just to try to find the ones I want to send.
Yeah, no, I absolutely have the same problem, man. But if you're looking for an easy way to share those pictures, you got to check out Aura Frames. Aura makes it easy to upload unlimited photos directly from your phone, so your favorite memories are always within view. I've talked about this all week, but as everybody knows, and everybody's been so nice with their condolences and whatnot, but a couple weeks ago I lost my dog, and I have a little altar to her. It's got her food and water bowl. It's got a couple of her stuffed animals that she loves. It's got her urn right here, and of course, it's got an Aura frame right there, loaded up with a ton of pictures of my beloved Gypsy Bug. And right now, there's one of her. Oh, that's a walk that we were on. She's on the left and my kid's on the right. But every 10 minutes or so, I think I have it set to 20 minutes actually. Every 20 minutes or so, it changes automatically to a new one. And it's a really awesome thing to have because every day I wake up, I come into the office, turn on the light, and the frame automatically activates. And there's I don't know what picture it's going to be. I got so many on there. I get a fresh picture of her every morning, and it's really awesome. You can personalize and preload an Aura frame as well, either filled with photos of life's huge milestones or pictures of fun everyday moments for an unforgettable gift for a loved one.
So save on the perfect gift by visiting auraframes.com to get $35 off Aura's best-selling Carver mat frames by using promo code RAW at checkout. That's auraframes.com, promo code RAW. This deal is exclusive to listeners, so get yours now in time for the holidays. Terms and conditions apply.
All right, man. Before we continue on, I want to bring this up really quick, man. We are at the beginning of December, and so the new predictions challenge is underway starting tomorrow with NXT's deadline. I showed this off. I debuted it yesterday on the show. The new Big Blue predictions hat for December specifically. Each month is going to have its own predictions challenge hat. Each hat is specifically and exclusively designed to make Larson more and more jealous every month he doesn't win. So eventually, dude, when you do win, because I have faith that you will eventually.
You're gonna be breaking my heart on a monthly basis now.
It's going to be a heartbreaking moment for you every single month. That fuels me. Here's the latest hat, Larson. I know you know what it looks like. You can see it in your head. If you can't see it, because the way we're shooting this, you can't see what I have on the screen, but it's beautiful. It's got it's instead of the white backing right here, it's got the gray backing. It says Big Blue Predictions Champion in kind of a WrestleMania-ish font. I was trying to, kind of emulate the spirit of the Saturday night's main event, which is the second event out of this Big Blue Predictions Challenge. Mm-hmm. And if you walk away at the end of all three events with the most points scored in the Predictions Challenge, you get this Big Blue hat. What hat will I try to make Larson seething with rage with next month? Find out. But if you want to take this hat from Larson's grasp, you can do that. But you got to win the Big Blue Predictions Challenge. And there's only two ways to do it. Number one, you got to do several things. First up, to enter, you got to get the Friendo Club set up. Now, the Friendo Club setup is, of course, clicking join right here at youtube.com/Steven Larson or going to patreon.com/Steven Larson and clicking on the Friendo Club setup there. It's $5 a month. You get a bonus. You got a ton of bonus episodes that we've got in our catalog, got access to our question threads, and, of course, the Big Blue Predictions Challenge. And then, of course, you got to win the thing. You got to put in with the other 200 plus friendos that usually participate in this thing, and you got to win. and then you get the hat. You get the hat is what you get.
Sorry, at a certain point, I just had to tune out because it was too much for me.
Yeah, I don't blame you. I can be quite obnoxious. Oh man. Anyways, also look, if you guys can do us a huge solid, hit that thumbs up on this video. If you like the idea of Larson not getting his hands on a hat that is specifically tailored for his tastes, hit that thumbs up. Hit that like button. If you like the stuff that we're talking about here, hit that thumbs up. Hit the subscribe button and the little notify bell as well.
Yes, please.
Yeah, man. Larson, you are welcome at any time to submit your own design to try and infuriate me for not winning the predictions challenge as well. So just keep that in mind, because this is, your operation as well. Just go ahead and send me the design when you're ready, and maybe you can have the January one.
I'll be, it's one of those things where I feel like you set the precedent, and now if I try to follow precedent, it's just a pale imitation of the original.
Wow. Okay.
You know what I mean?
Okay. All right.
It seems reactionary instead of proactive. I got to be proactive about something.
I'm just saying, if the door is open, if you ever want to flex, your visual, aesthetic, creative muscle, whatever, feel free to. And also remember how extra heartbreaking it would be for you to win the hat.
That's not my concern.
Some extra incentive for you, perhaps.
Perhaps.
Anyways, let's go ahead and move on to number 7.
7.
Dean Ambrose turns on Seth Rollins after Roman Reigns announces the return of his leukemia. It's funny because when I read this, I was like, boy, that was a hell of a move for Vince McMahon. Let's break our hearts with something incredibly real. Roman Reigns announcing he has leukemia, and by the end of it, I need a new heel. And so
it's quite. I remember watching this live, and I rewatched Roman's promo to open the show.
Oh, it's devastating.
It's just devastating.
That's some real shit right there. Yeah.
And and the segment, of course, at the end where Seth and Dean win the tag titles from Dolph and Drew McIntyre.
Okay.
And then Dean instantly turns on Seth, hits him with the dirty deeds in the ring, peels back the ring mats, another one on the floor. Mm-hmm. It is an emotional roller coaster, and you have Michael Cole screaming, "Of all nights, not tonight."
Yeah.
Because earlier, after Roman drops his promo, after he tells us, the viewing audience, the crowd there, I can't say it's a promo because this is him speaking from the heart.
Yeah, right.
That and apparently neither Dean nor Seth knew what he was going to say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They found out when we did.
Ooh.
And so their reactions when they walk out on that stage to greet Roman as he walks back up were real.
Seth was crying.
Seth was crying a ton.
Yeah.
And so I found it was a Q&A of some sort with Seth Rollins where someone asked him about the process of making that decision to do the heel turn that night. And he says, that's when he mentions, we didn't know about it, as in him and Dean didn't know about it. Only a select few people knew what Roman was going to go out and say. But then apparently at some point, Triple H pulled them aside and said to them, Dean and Seth, it's up to you two whether the heel turn still happens tonight.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And so Seth said, hey, we talked about it, and they came to the mutual decision that they would go ahead with it. Mm-hmm. Because, Triple H said you could wait a week.
Yeah.
And do it next week. But apparently, the rationale was if it's going to have the maximum emotional impact for the audience, then in their estimation, it would be that same night. Everything after that was fumbled by creative.
Yeah.
When it came to Dean's heel turn.
Was that Dean's last heel turn? Was that the one where he showed the mask and all that? Okay.
Where he was scared of getting sick from the audience and
they did the shot. Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
boy,
he had
that
the
was
gas
terrible.
mask and all that stuff.
Yeah,
stuff he talked extensively on Talk is Jericho about.
Okay, yeah.
So what apparently happened with that is so the Shield got back together in November. Well, that's when he got hurt. Late 2017. Dean hurt his tricep, was out. So Seth and Roman kind of had like a, very loosely aligned still, but not referring to themselves as the Shield. Dean was out longer than expected, and while he was out with the injury, he kind of made a decision already he wasn't going to re-sign.
Yeah.
But he was going to ride out the rest of his contract. So he came back the week before SummerSlam. He went with Seth to the ring for his Intercontinental title match. And then, a couple months later, they won the tag titles, and then he turned heel on them. And then it was like the following spring, he was gone.
Yeah, okay, yeah. Yeah, right. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, bro, yeah, dude, I don't know. I mean, I understand. Stop. I understand the idea of let's get the most emotional impact out of that. I don't know. I'm not there, but like, as a fan, I'll put it this way: as a fan, I might have been okay with them taking a different route to get to the heel turn, as opposed to it being that night. You know what I mean? Even just from like a story logic standpoint, like, because at that point, within the context of the WWE story, Roman's very real sickness, the leukemia, plays into it. And so, like, as characters, for that to be the response, which is almost a knee-jerk thing, seems not really in keeping with, like, the characters. You know what I mean? Like,
no, I understand. But, I was, with that in mind, I was trying to think of maybe some rationale, whether for the characters of Seth and Dean or the performers, why... Because Seth didn't go into detail about the exact content of that conversation. They just said mutually they agreed to do it that night. And maybe, whether it was a thing where they thought, as characters, that Dean thought Roman was the glue holding the Shield together. Without Roman, there might not, why even bother with the Shield?
Sure.
Or something to that effect.
It's how you do, maybe it's how you deal with, not everybody copes with
exactly
life-altering news the same way.
Yeah.
And
then maybe Dean's reaction was lashing out at the person that was closest to him.
In the moment that his emotion is running the highest.
Unfortunately, we didn't get any nuance when it came to Dean's explanation for the heel turn, because that's not what Vince did.
Right, yeah.
I think it was just like, I don't know you an explanation. I've been playing second fiddle to Seth.
Well, wasn't that when Vince wanted Dean to say some fucked up things? Yeah. And Dean was like, dude, I'm drawing the line here. Like, there's some things I'm not. And there was one, I remember there was one line specifically that, like, he was kind of appalled at that.
He said they'd lose sponsors if he said it.
Mm-hmm, yeah, right. Yeah.
Boy.
Yep. Anyways, that was 2019 Vince McMahon booking right there.
Yeah.
Anyways, let's move on to number 6. Ciampa destroys DIY from NXT TakeOver Chicago. Of course, this is the beginning of the storyline that you and I have often touted as, like, as an actual story, as a plot, as an emotional, series of moments. One of the best things that WWE has ever done.
Yeah. And I say this all the time, so sorry if I'm a broken record here, but it's the story that in my mind elevated the possibilities of pro wrestling storytelling, not just because it was an intense feud between two former partners, but they actually utilized symbolism in terms of a knee brace and a crutch. They weren't just, weapons to be used against the opponents. Those things were imbued with meaning based on the nature of the feud itself. But like, what makes it heartbreaking more than just somebody else turning on their one partner turning on the other is that we saw their journey all through NXT. They came in not the lauded free agents of Finn Balor or Kevin Owens. They were brought in as basically enhancement talent to NXT. Endeared themselves to the audience there. Started tagging. They had that great moment, a great match, and the great moment in the Cruiserweight Classic. Where Ciampa beat Gargano and put his arm around him.
Yeah, it was awesome. Yeah.
Like, we witnessed their friendship develop before our eyes. And we saw them finally win the tag titles after several attempts that failed.
Yeah.
And then they have this match against Authors of Pain, who were at that point were booked like a force of nature in NXT, basically unstoppable. And try as they might, they couldn't retain the titles. And Ciampa, who I think during the course of this match blew out his knee, and I think walked into it with a shoulder injury.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
or maybe hurt his shoulder and knee in the match. I don't recall exactly. At the end of it, and this is really what set the precedent for NXT. When you have the copyright bug up, you don't turn the show off.
No,
because something could happen.
Yeah, or like at Survivor Series where it's just like more celebration, and then it just goes to the post.
And then it's more celebration. You're waiting for that thing.
Yeah.
So we all know what happens. Ciampa throws Gargano into the Tron. Ultimately sends him off the stage, and you're just left wondering why. And all we get from Ciampa is, "You took my moment from me."
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I know Ciampa was out for a while. Gargano went on his own journey until Ciampa came back, and then kicked off one of the best rivalries in WWE history. It was so good. It was so good. And unfortunately, injuries again reared their head as they were kind of concluding this. So we didn't really. I don't know if we got to see. It was injuries and a call-up for DIY the main roster is what really kind of put a stop to this in terms of a satisfying conclusion.
Yeah, that call-up screwed over a couple people, including, well, not really Ricochet, but Aleister Black. I still maintain that, like, if they had nailed his call-up, he would have started at such a higher level.
Yeah.
And they brought him in as a tag with Ricochet. Boy, that killed it. Him and being a room for like a year. Boy, that really hurt a lot. Yeah. Anyways, let's move on to number 5. Talked about this earlier. Shawn Michaels retires Ric Flair. Of course, is a WrestleMania 24. I talked about this a little bit before. I think it was in Flair's book where he talked about McMahon calling him up and being like, "Hey, you're gonna retire WrestleMania. We need a big thing." So it's gonna be the end of your career. Of course, he didn't. He went on to TNA and still do some stuff. And literally last year, he did as well. But it was kind of interesting. There was a couple different stories that surround this particular retirement. Of course, everybody knows, and it's actually at this point you've seen it used as a meme on social media. The "I'm sorry, I love you" sweet chin music from Shawn Michaels to Ric Flair.
A bawling Ric Flair. I mean, they're both crying.
They're both crying, yeah. Shawn Michaels revealed on the Sam Roberts show, the Not Sam Wrestling podcast, talked about the match, and it said in the middle of the night, apparently, is when he came up with it. He said that particular match was something that came to me in the middle of the night. I woke up out of sleep. I think it was like 2 o'clock in the morning. I got up out of bed and then just went to the table and started writing. Then I'm coming down to the end of it. Those thoughts that are in my head, and of course, like a movie, I get a little teardrop. I'm like, oh my goodness, is this too namby-pamby? He says, I mean, wrestling audiences, they can be tough. I just thought, I don't know. But again, because it was so emotional for me, because I knew Rick was at that time, and I knew how important it was to him. It was genuinely important to me because it was important to him. He said, this is how Rick reacted to it. I wanted this to be really unbelievably special for him. It's still Shawn Michaels. He says, it's my chance for him to say, of all the great matches he's had, my best one was with Shawn Michaels at whatever age he was at the time. So there were a number of reasons I wanted to go well, but then you're looking at this ending and it's like, sounds like a love story, and that might not really go over well with a tough crowd, but I kept it. I presented that to Michael Hayes and Rick when we got to WrestleMania. Rick just patted me on the leg and goes, thank you. And I was still waiting, like, does that thank you mean it's good or not? Then I asked Michael, and he's the one that helps. Now he starts to think about framing it and making it what it turned out to be. Huh. So pretty thoughtful stuff there from the Heartbreak Kid.
Yeah. I got this is from an interview that Court Bauer did with Sean Ross Sapp and Raj Giri from Wrestling Inc.
Okay.
Back in 2016. And Court Bauer mentions a name that kind of sparked the genesis of this whole story for Rick. So the story was that I think towards the end of, it was the previous fall prior to WrestleMania 24, Rick comes out and drops a promo, says, I'm never retiring. And then Vince responds with, next time you lose a match, you're done.
Yeah.
This is all how it played out on TV. So take a guess about who floated this idea initially to Vince.
I don't know.
Stone Cold Steve Austin.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So
Yeah,
this
I
is
think
what
I
Court
remember
Bauer
reading
said.
that.
At WrestleMania 23, Steve Austin floated to Vince that he thought Rick would be retiring soon and pitched this idea that Rick would lose at WrestleMania, he'd be fighting the odds every match, and if he lost, he'd retire to culminate at WrestleMania. Broad idea. So Court Bauer talks about bringing it. Court Bauer talks about Vince really liking it and wanted a plan drawn up. So he says this: Vince loved the idea and said, "We're doing it." He told Brian Gewirtz to do it. By late June, Vince is like, "Where's the story at? Let's do it." Nothing. He gets upset, and I get assigned the story. I map it out. We know where it's going and ending, but how do we get there? I wanted to sprinkle in moments from his life and career and build those pay-per-views like chapters, revisiting his rivalries along the way. He was going to have confrontations with younger talent who would get the rub working with them, having these fresh, one-of-a-kind matches. So apparently there was pitched a match with a reunited Four Horsemen against Ricky Steamboat. So this would be the match. Survivor Series. Steamboat, Foley, Dusty Rhodes, and Sting.
Oh, wow.
Who apparently his TNA deal was expiring around Survivor Series time, against Flair, Malenko, and mentions Barry Windham here.
Wow.
That would have been a Survivor Series match prior to WrestleMania 24.
That's
Obviously,
crazy.
that didn't happen.
Yeah.
So it seemed like the as pitched initially, it was as pitched by Stone Cold. There's a very basic idea, which was actually closer to what was implemented rather than what some of the people in creative devised to really kind of flesh out and kind of do a retrospective of Rick's career up until WrestleMania 24.
I like that Stone Cold is basically just retired Ric Flair.
Yeah.
Hey, Vince, I got an idea. Ric Flair should retire. Ric Flair's like, the fuck? What?
Like, why are you speaking for me, Austin?
I don't want to retire. Woo! I got 20 more years. Yeah.
I wonder if Stone Cold heard that from his watch.
If my watch is telling me your time's up, you old sack of shit. That's what you get for treating me like shit back in WCW.
Oh,
man.
my goodness.
Let's move on now to number 4.
4.
New Day on the Rocks. New Day on the... I like how you phrase this. Yeah, man, this just happened. New Day, Kofi, and Xavier Woods having problems for months and months and months. This friendship, this brotherhood being torn to shreds. And let's get to the point where on their grand 10-year anniversary, they get together and they're about to tell this crowd, they're about to break all of our hearts and say, hey, we're going to go our separate ways. And then they find a common enemy, a subject so unifying that it heals the bonds, or it heals the wounds between these two. And that's Big E. That's Big E showing up and offering his managerial services.
Yeah.
And they said, go back to your girlfriend. Go back to your desk job. You chose your girlfriend over us.
So you broke your neck. So what?
Yeah. So what?
Dismissing the fact that he broke his neck in maybe the worst pop possible.
Yeah, man.
Oh, it was gut wrenching. It was heartbreaking seeing Big E, who hasn't been on, apart from like the kickoff shows and stuff, WTV in years.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
Make a plea to his friends to stick together.
Mm-hmm.
Let's keep doing it. I'll come back out on the road with you guys, even though I can't wrestle now, but I'm trying to get cleared, and let's do this together again. And then Woods just says, now is when you come back after we've been arguing for months.
Yeah.
Now that we're on the edge of the cliff, the precipice of the cliff, now you're going to try to come here and get us to back off before we jump? No. No. And the stages of heartbreak that E is faced with every point they bring up.
Yeah.
Dismissing his broken neck.
Keeps on saying, what are you saying?
Yeah.
Why you keep saying that?
Saying he's stuck at a desk job.
Yeah.
Saying he'd rather spend time with his girlfriend rather than with them.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, it's just heartbreaking. It's just absolutely heartbreaking watching that.
It was brilliant. It was absolutely brilliant.
Kofi and Woods being able to solidify their friendship by casting out seemingly one of the most likable people on planet Earth, you know?
It's the thing. The thing is, it's so absurdly funny too. It's so darkly, tragically hilarious. Because Big E comes out, he's like, "Man, I thought we're all grown-ups here. I'm dealing with a broken neck. I've been seeing all these. I've been trying to explore other opportunities. Like, being a manager, sometimes you have to get physical, but I'm willing to do that for you guys if it means we don't throw all this away." And they just give him a big "fuck you. We're staying together."
We're staying together despite you.
Yeah, despite you. Yeah, as a direct assault on what you just told us of your friendship.
Ugh.
Yeah, that was good stuff.
It was a gut punch.
It really was.
Like perfectly executed by everybody involved. Performances across the board were top notch. The staging of it, just initially when I made this list, I thought about putting this at number 1 initially, but I feel like we need time.
Oh yeah,
follow through.
Yeah,
I know that it's still sticking with me, and I went back and watched what eventually went number 1, and I was like, no, this is it. This is what we have number 1 for me is the most heartbreaking. It might be the most perfectly executed story beat I've ever seen in a wrestling ring, but we'll get to that later.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree with that. I think that this, like you might have been able to flip 4 and 3, but 2 and 1 deserve to be where they're at. I really do think. Let's go ahead and move on to number 3 while we're at it. Number 3.
Three.
Festival of Friendship. We talked about this the other day while we were talking about the New Day stuff on the Raw review. Of course, Kevin Owens and Chris Jericho, especially at the time, their chemistry, they were so likable in their chemistry. And especially at the time when the company was going through in the main event scene, you had basically Goldberg, Brock, and Roman Reigns. It was a breath of fresh air for two guys who were always on the wrong end of a Brock Lesnar era, a Goldberg era, or whatever, formed this alliance that really people just overwhelmingly loved because the chemistry was just off the charts. Jericho was doing something that people just found endlessly clever and hilarious. And the list of Jericho was good stuff. And whenever Kevin Owens is a good guy and has a best friend, he's absolutely hilarious. He really is. And so when you start to see little fissures and little cracks, and then specifically when Jericho offered up Owens in the Universal Championship against Goldberg, it was like, oh, this is probably not going to last very long. And so we get to this Festival of Friendship situation. And that's
there's also that conversation. We see the conversation that Triple H has with Kevin Owens before this too.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Don't know what's said.
Yeah.
Just a quick shot of them talking.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, they do this big rigmarole where Jericho has a bunch of presents for Kevin Owens and, really showing him how much he loves the guy. And then Kevin Owens gives him his present. And he's like, oh, it's a new list. And Jericho, to his credit, executes this perfectly because he opens up the box and he's got the list down here. He says, oh, it's a new list. And he holds it up so everybody else can see that on the back it says the list of Kevin Owens. And he says, why is my name on it? Kevin Owens just completely murders the guy.
Yeah.
And it is one of the most heartbreaking friendship coming to an end moment. That resulted in a U.S. title match at WrestleMania that I don't even remember much of it, to be honest with you. But
no, that's the match where Kevin Owens went backstage and asked Vince if he liked it, and Vince just told him no.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
It was that match.
Well, Vince didn't find it very memorable either.
I guess not. So I've got these quotes here from Chris Jericho. He was on the Squared Circle Pit podcast talking about getting Festival of Friendship put together. His transcript are from Fightful. He says, I came up with it, and then everyone put in their ideas. I knew from the start that it would have showgirls, it would have Friendship the Magician. I don't know who came up with the creation of Kevin, that poster. Vince's one contribution was that he wanted the statue, the intertwined Guggenheim. What I wanted was to start as a David Lee Roth video from the 80s and turn it into the Red Wedding from Game of Thrones. So he continues. There was actually a big debate. The finish was approved by Vince, but Vince wasn't there that week. When he's not there, everyone has their opinions. So I was told Kevin is just going to attack you. I was like, no, that's what Vince and I discussed. Well, it's going to be too much comedy if you have the list of Owens. Not the way I'm going to play it. It's not comedy if you don't play it as comedy.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting.
It seems like even when Vince is there,
yeah,
you got to struggle to get your creative ideas on TV.
Well, what's interesting is, dude, I hate to give Vince much credit, but around this time is when you really started. Vince had some good stuff between up until this, like from the end of the guest host era, whenever that really was, 2011, 2012, I guess it
2011, 2012, something like that, yeah.
Till about 2017, you have some things that are really good in that time. Well, there's some shit too, but it wasn't until like 2018 that like it really, and I know like, the trying to endlessly push Roman Reigns, but in the mid card, there was plenty of good stuff there. And this was one of them. And you got to ask yourself what, going back, let's say to like Vince Russo in the Attitude Era, how that Vince filter, the Vince McMahon filter, really helped siphon the shit from, some stuff that really created some memorable television. And that, when you look at Jericho and AEW, you got to wonder if there might be a similar situation where Jericho just left to whatever he wants to do might be too much Jericho. Under Vince McMahon, where you really got to make sure that you're going to bring the best possible version of your story and fight, and you're going to have to fight for it. If you're going to have to fight for something, you're going to know you got to make sure that you are on solid ground. Mm-hmm. It's not a fucking laboratory out there. And I wonder if that might be the difference between Jericho with the structure of WWE and Jericho just kind of doing whatever he wants to do in AEW.
That could be.
I don't know.
That could be.
Let's move on to number 2. Seth Rollins burns down the Shield. Ooh, the Plan B, man.
Yeah, Raw, June 2nd, 2014. It's hard to believe the Shield accomplished all they did in a matter of about less than 2 years.
Yeah.
November 2012, they made their debut, and about a year and 7 months later, done.
They were ready to go, man. They were ready made. They were good to go.
There's something to be said about breaking up a team or a faction when they're at the peak of their popularity, because that was definitely the case. Like, the Shield just came off beating Evolution, I think, at Batista's last match before his final match against Triple H. Mm-hmm. At Payback 2014. It was the following night on Raw that Triple H is like, nope, we're going to keep feuding with the Shield, even though Batista quit. And this is when Triple H says that he's always got a plan B. Mm-hmm. You know what happened next.
Yeah.
Seth blasts Roman in the back with that chair, setting off a series of events that leads us to where we are today with the Bloodline.
Yeah, I mean, this is why I'm really excited for, at some point, you got to think they're going to do a Mania Night 2 Seth versus Roman.
You'd hope
so. Especially with the way they're approaching Seth now and the whole concept of don't help Roman Reigns regain power. And Seth killing himself at this year's WrestleMania. To try and atone for this moment over 10 years ago now.
Yeah. And
for that to get some resolution in the end, I think could make for just, because a lot has been made over Cody being the guy to beat Roman. And I remember Seth saying something along the lines of, well, this guy just sort of walked in here, after leaving the company, after creating its competition, he just walked in here and he gets all this stuff handed to him on a silver platter, which is an incredibly, and with Seth Rollins, like, I feel like there's always an element of what he really feels, understanding that this is all the world of make-believe and we're all characters, kind of similar to the, CM Punk, he's a cancer thing. When he was asked that question, Seth Rollins is savvy enough to know that it was incredibly possible for him to be in a program with CM Punk down the line. So when he says something like that, it seems, especially in retrospect, so much better to distance the Seth Roman thing, let the Cody thing happen, and then revisit the Seth stuff with Roman, because we'd seen like Seth and Roman were 1A and 1B for such a long time.
Yeah.
And so it's like you cool off on that and revisit. I mean, because I know they did the Rumble match a couple of years ago where Seth was really trying to get in his head using the Shield stuff, and in fact won that match by DQ because Roman beat him up so bad. But to eventually come around to that, the history that they can mine, the video packages they can produce, that can be a generational lifetime match.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really a shame that we never got the Shield triple threat match at WrestleMania.
Yeah, I agree.
They did it once at like Battleground. Mm-hmm. I think it was one of the pay-per-views shortly after each member held the title at Money in the Bank.
Yeah, right.
Was it 2016, whatever it was? That they did it at Battleground rather than saving a match of that magnitude potentially for at least one of the major 4 shows.
Right, yeah.
And they just did it. They just put it on a B-level pay-per-view, which boggles my mind.
You know, dude, if it was today and you have those 3 guys in the company, I have no doubt that would have to be something on the agenda, because all the history there, the personalities, the different perspectives, points of view. That's why I say, you know, man, they could really mine some shit with just Seth and Roman. They really could. And I hope they do. I really hope they do.
I hope so too. I hope so too.
All right, man, let's talk about number 1. Sami Zayn stands up to the Bloodline at the Royal Rumble 2023.
There's so many good segments during Sammy's run with the Bloodline.
Yeah.
The term cinema gets tossed around fairly loosely as it relates to pro wrestling. Mm-hmm. The finish to Royal Rumble 2023 is fucking cinema.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The dramatic weight, the performances,
yeah,
the complexity. Everybody in that ring at various moments, especially at the end, is dealing with heartbreak during this whole segment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Sammy heartbroken about having to make the choice. Do I bash my former best friend in the head with this chair? Or do I turn my back on the people who have actually accepted me, something that he's been looking for years?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Amongst his colleagues in WWE.
Yeah.
He bashes Roman with the chair. Another betrayal for Roman. Heartbreak.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Fucking Jay.
Yeah.
It's just devastating. He was so good at just easily, effectively communicating everything that was going on in his head, and all he did was this. He'd bring his shoulders forward and his head down. You knew exactly what he was feeling. He was heartbroken that someone that he trusted betrayed his family, but at the same time, he was upset that he couldn't do it himself.
Yeah.
That he couldn't muster up the courage to hit Roman with the chair.
Yeah.
Oh, it's just masterfully done. Masterfully done.
It is. It is. I mean, that whole Bloodline, there were so many great segments, and for it to lead to that, when you see, because I watched this again the other day, and when you see them first start to lay into Kevin Owens, Sami Zayn's kind of into it a little bit. He's like, oh yeah, I'm part of the Bloodline. But then it goes like a step too far, and then several steps too far, and you see Sami just absolutely die inside because he knows this is about to end for him. And it's so masterfully played. Like the whole, it's so well done. It's one of those things where it during that span of time, turning on SmackDown, really, it gave you that good anxiety. Like, oh, I'm about to see some stuff that's going to make me a little bit, because it's so dramatically good. You know, it's like,
puts you on edge, makes you a little uncomfortable.
Yeah. It's like Pacino telling what's her face, his sister, his brother-in-law, that he's out of the family business, knowing that he's about to have him killed.
Yeah.
Because he knows that he had Sonny killed. It's stuff like that where it's like, oh God. And we really had never had that in wrestling before. Like, I mean, you might be able to go back, and if you're, I don't know. I'm sure along the way there were moments being there live for certain things that people were like, "Oh my god!" But to watch this on television, where there's that separation, especially after for so long during the later Vince years of it being sort of dog shit.
Yeah.
Man, for it to get to this point where you, like you said, it's an ensemble, and everybody is performing at a complex level. That stuff, it cannot be topped. It really
It's
cannot be
the
topped.
closest pro wrestling's ever got to prestige television.
Absolutely, yeah.
If you took the same story, took it out of the world of pro wrestling, and set it anywhere else, you follow those story beats,
Yeah.
that show would be damn fantastic.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Because it's about the complex dynamics between everybody involved.
Yeah.
And there was so much good stuff, but I don't think it got any better than Rumble 2023. Gosh, it's so
yeah.
good.
I have a hard time disagreeing with that. Severance comes back in 2 weeks, you know.
Oh,
Less
that's
than 2
exciting.
weeks, so.
Speaking of
Yeah.
prestige television.
I'm excited about that one. That's going to be good. Anyways, so yeah, there you go. There's the top 10 heartbreaking moments in pro wrestling. Let us know what you guys think in the comments below. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. We appreciate it. Till next time, we'll see you guys around.
Goodbye.